evening, everyone. It is Wednesday, March 5th, almost spring. We are joined for our 5th anniversary month. We started this show 5 years ago in the middle of the lockdown, the first week of lockdown, actually. We are honored to have our guest, our Fab Four -1, Governor Ehrlich and First Lady Kendel Ehrlich and Governor Allen, and we wish speedy recovery to First Lady of Virginia, Susan Allen. Take it away, guys.
Okay. Well, let me just say Susan wishes she could be with us, but her voice is so hoarse. She still looks real pretty, but her voice is, you all heard her beforehand, and so she's taking a rain check for today. So it's good to be with the Chesapeake governors and Kendel and Bob, and we have plenty of stuff we could talk about from Washington to state politics. And I'll turn it over to the hosts, Kendel and Bob.
Well, we really
whoever.
welcome you. Yeah, well, we welcome you. Let's start with last night was obviously President Trump's speech to Congress that's really set the tone for the last couple of weeks. Gentlemen, and Kendel, what are your thoughts about that?
I'll go first. I loved it. I thought it was direct.
Oh, Mrs. Trump loved it all right here.
I thought it set the right tone. It made me feel good, like the adults are in charge. Common sense is here. We know boys and girls. We know girls are protected in sports. We know the border, thankfully, dear Lord. And I just felt like the country's in good hands.
I thought obviously the same thing. I think running down the list of accomplishments was obviously a nice thing to do, very favorably reacted to, according to today's polls. It was classic Trump. It was so with regard to our base, it was raw meat. It was pretty partisan for what amounted to a State of the Union. The pointing at the Dems and at various points in the speech was not missed by anybody. I thought that, and Kendel made this observation today, which I thought was great. All of us, Gov, I'm not sure whether you did this. I did during my stay of the state. I think Reagan actually started the tradition of bringing guests in the gallery, creating context for your positions, just making it tangible. People could feel, touch, understand, and actually look at a person and understand what you're trying to do in a much more effective way. That now is practiced every state of the union. What Trump did last night was click it up a notch. Not just, hey, here's a 13-year-old cancer survivor, or here's a kid at West Point. Here, you're into West Point, baby. Congratulations. you're on to remember the Secret Service, and here's the official paperwork. And making it much more memorable, one. So I thought that was very, very effective. I think that it's almost a cliche these days. In one sense, I hate the metaphor of this is a hill to die on because I hate war metaphors. On the other hand, it's so appropriate in politics. And when you think about the hills they're choosing to at least fight on, biological boys and girls locker rooms and on athletic fields, and sort of an open border and protecting criminal aliens, and calling Trump and Musk Hitler and all that stuff. It's just not effective. And again, Gov, I'll conclude there, but certainly the polling today reflects the ineffectiveness of sort of the stunts that were pulled last night, what they've done. Now, I'll just add this before I close. We all know here that at some point the Democrats are going to get their act together. They're going to come up with a message at some point. But last night was not that night.
Yeah, I agree with you on the address. He started off very partisan. My general view was don't keep rubbing it in. I think maybe it's a sportsman in me is, all right, you've won the election, don't rub it in. And so forth. You had your election night victory speech, you had your inauguration, so forth, and all of that. But that's Trump. And naturally, you're not going to get any response for the Democrats clapping that, that we won, we won every one of the battleground states and so forth. So that's all understandable. I try to pay attention to issues and ideas and what really matters rather than personalities. And I think that I was taking notes. I loved it when he said that he's going to end the green news scam. I loved that. Getting us out of that Paris climate scheme that was awful for our sovereignty as a country, our competitiveness, and a waste of money. He wanted to get rid of the electric vehicle mandate. Again, free people can decide what kind of car they want to drive, whether it's electric or battery or hybrid or diesel or gasoline or compressed natural gas or corn from a jar. It's their choice. And that was great. And then saying going to make English the official language. I remember, Bob, when you were in Congress, when I was in Congress and the Senate, we all said we want to make English the official language, which of course it is. But the fact that that's been going on for about 30 or 40 years, it's just, it's really stunning. And he says it's a common sense revolution, which I always like because I'd always defined myself as a common sense Jeffersonian conservative, trusting free people and free enterprise. And so long as you're not harming someone else, don't limit people. If you do harm someone else, those people do need to be restrained. So I thought his ideas on taxes, on energy, on regulations, and all of that were good. The tariff stuff is just constantly evolving. And I worry about the tariffs, particularly on Canada. It matters to our ports. It matters to our economy. I was saying that Susan and I got us a brand new Chevrolet Tahoe in early December. And I said, I'm so glad we got that then, because with the tariffs on aluminum and all the rest of it, they're talking about, the price of vehicles are going to go up by several thousands of dollars. So, but I do think the one thing on tariffs that is logical and I think reasonable on Trump's part is the concept of reciprocity.
Yeah.
If they put a 10%, I don't care what the country is, it doesn't matter. Country XYZ puts a 10% tariffs on our goods coming into their country, we're going to put one on theirs. Canada, I just don't see where Canada is that much of a problem. I can't for Virginia, and maybe Maryland is probably the same, but our biggest import-export trading country is Canada. China is second. Mexico's number 3. Yeah. And every state, I remember when Trump was renegotiating the USMCA, US Mexico Canada deal, every state, either their number 1 or number 2 trading partner was Canada or Mexico. Naturally, the states more to the west and south were Mexico, and others were Canada. And so it's again, the concept of reciprocity makes sense. And so and they're going to do that April 2nd. And I love it. I just get a kick out of him and said, well, I want to make it April 1st, but I just didn't think we should do it. He's just thinking out loud. And so I didn't want to do it April 1st. So we're going to make it April 2nd.
He loves that.
I know. And then when he went to the list of all of that wasteful, just terrible spending on not just frivolous, but just objectionably ridiculous spending.
Yeah.
On what I'm not going to go through doing sex changes on mice or whatever they were, and so forth. And he just goes to that list. It's classic. So then the Democrats' reaction to it all made it all the better, because they couldn't even stand to cheer for that young kid who is a cancer survivor and was put in the Secret Service, or the Laken Riley family. You can't stand for them. I mean, and their stupid little signs. I mean, the whole thing was ridiculous. And now Congressman Green gets escorted out. Now
that was disgraceful.
I know, but think of the politics of it. The guy's a hero for the other side. Now, Governor Ehrlich brought up, when do they get their act together, other than being for transgender and boys in girls' locker rooms and sports teams. No one watched it because Trump's speech was the longest ever. And so when Senator Slotkin, she's a new senator from Michigan, she was, and I'm going to be objective. She was, I thought she'd be awful. She was surprisingly very good, but she's on at 11:30 at night. So everyone in the Eastern time zone wasn't watching it. And, but she actually gave a reasonable response. Whoever gives a response to the president, I don't care what party you're in, you're at such a disadvantage compared to the pageantry of, you're on the House of Representatives floor and the Capitol and all of that. But she led out, she said she won her district and so did Donald Trump. And there are those places where both sides win. And the key to winning elections in battleground states, a place like Virginia is not quite a battleground state, but the only way you can win in Virginia, or for that matter, Maryland, is the Republicans are a minority or behind. In Virginia, we're maybe about 5%.
Now we're a minority. We're a real.
Well, you're probably 20%
Division I minority.
Yeah. Well, the point is you want to get those swing voters, those independent voters, and I thought Slotkin's response was the type of response Democrats would want to have, where you're trying to reach out to the middle and say, we care about working people, we care about taxes, we just want to do things less chaotically, or there's better ways of doing things. So I thought hers was a much more diplomatic and it would be more persuasive. But again, hardly anybody watched it. And the people who watched the speech overwhelmingly were Republicans. When Obama was president or Biden was president, the stronger numbers were, people in their same party.
Hey, Golf, if I can stop you there and just make an observation.
Perfect.
Make an observation to you. You're right. Smooth, and that's a tough gig. We know that. And it's the joke in Washington is that's your ticket to political oblivion when you. but the fact of it is, so she does this sort of moderate sort of temperature deal. But the fact of it is their policy positions don't comport with anything close to moderate. And they're not going to change today as a function of a decent speech last night. So I have a specific recollection of being on MSNBC, believe it or not. It was after Trump won, and I was being followed by a Democrat member of Congress. And I wrote this in one of my books. The interview was, and I'm paraphrasing, but very close to what he said. He said, you know what? We have to learn our lesson. We have to become more moderate. We have to reach out. We've losing the working class, all the usual platitudes. And then he says, and we're going to protect sanctuary cities. It was just perfect.
They still don't
the
get
dichotomy there, the distinction was totally lost on him. And that's what speeches last night remind me of.
Yeah.
You can find somebody they won't cancel overnight to give a moderate sounding message, but their policy positions haven't changed one bit. Yeah,
maybe a really good point is her tone and manner came off as moderate, polite, especially after you had Congressman Green, screaming and yelling and getting pulled off the floor, and people walking out and all of that. So anybody who was just
civil.
Yeah, civil. That's exactly right. Just normally civil. Gee, that came off. That one's not a crazy loon with it. But you're right on the policies. They still are these climate apocalypse cult folks. They're still criminal apologists. And the jobs, the only jobs they ever talk about are union jobs, and they would get rid of right to work laws in a split second if they could get away with it. And so you're right. Their policies are the same. And then you get the other fun thing, and this Republicans as well, but the folks like Schumer and them from New York on this limit of $10,000 deduction on state and local taxes. And so they all yell, the Republicans care about all their millionaire buddies, this, that, and the other. Well, those are the ones who are paying the high property and income taxes in high tax New York and New Jersey and those states that are losing population. And so them, yelping and whining and mewing about we need to get rid of that limitation, that's not helping the folks that are working at Sarah's Diner or, someplace.
The irony is thick. The
irony that's diplomatic. I call it hypocrisy.
That's good. I was taking the high ground there.
I know you're not. You're next to Kendel.
I must say the attitude of the Democrats still shocked me, because I don't think I ever watched a State of the Union where they holding up signs.
Yeah.
And I don't think you've ever had a member kicked out. I think Green probably was the first to ever get kicked out during a State of the Union type speech. And the third thing, the little boy that they made a Secret Service agent who was recovering from cancer, my understanding is he was a constituent of Congressman Green's.
Oh, really?
That's what I heard. I heard he was a constituent.
Didn't know that.
And
Green becomes a hero and I think they did the signs for whatever reason, because they didn't want to make noise, and we've had some folks yelling.
That's true.
in the past. But it just comes off as so stupid. It just looks foolish.
Yeah, and to have a
It's
sign,
like a bingo game.
I understand it's silent, but when you're part of a group, you're holding up a protest sign. It just seems, I don't know.
Yeah, listen, truth be told, it's always middle school assembly to begin with. I mean, that's the fact of it. My first day of the union, Newt pulled us into the conference, and here I am thinking, man, this is a big deal. State of the Union, whoa. And Newt's telling everybody, don't whisper, don't curse, don't pick your nose, don't do this, don't do that. And then it's rowdy. It's rowdy. But
I think it's gotten even more rowdy.
Yeah.
And I've never seen it. This address was the most obviously partisan of any I've seen. There's always times, whether when Biden was president, he would say something. I mean, a blind hog finds an acorn every now and then.
He didn't know he was saying it.
Yeah. Oh, but they had him all jazzed up in his final State of the Union address, and he'll say something that there'll be some positive reaction to. And the same with Trump in his first term. I'm sure he said something that folks would agree with, but this just so adamant in their opposition to just everything, and it's so visually apparent to anybody watching that these folks just sit there and that's all they can do. And the other thing is they just seem so out of touch that they bring in government employees, and no one likes to see someone lose a job. But that's the mindset of Washington, that these government employees are to be, and again, we all have sympathy for them, and there needs to be understanding for folks losing a job. But for the rest of the country, they're saying, yeah, the federal government's bloated. There needs to be a reduction in the workforce. And so they make them the victims as guests. And it reminded me of Schumer, of all things, when President Trump put the tariffs on Mexico, and he's talking about, well, you can't get Modelo beer or Mexican beer and avocados.
Right.
Of all the things that, it's not as if there's not hundreds of different brews of beer from the USA. And avocados, you could live without avocados. Okay. But it's just such an elitist, out of touch approach that they would actually think. And Schumer thought he was really clever. Oh, isn't this great? You're not going to be able to drink your Mexican beer or have your guacamole dip without avocados. And I'm just thinking, you're so out of touch with normal people.
Well, listen, it's almost a cliche, although it's been just a couple months, but we always talk about lessons learned. One, again, I hate to sound like a politician with all these stories, but I never forgot another story. My first week in Congress, someone that we both know, Gov. I'm a freshman. I'm standing there. A member comes up to me, a Democrat, and he said, "You know what, Bobby? most of my caucus thinks we lost the 94 election because we're not liberal enough.
No.
Okay. And I'm reminded of that story when I see last night and what's occurred with respect to these last 10, 12, 14 weeks from the left. It's a cliche that we've learned our lessons, but clearly they feel liberals are on milk cartons right now. They're quiet. Progressives control the party. It's a progressive agenda. It's a progressive party. If you speak out of turn, you get canceled. And that seems to be the way they want to go for the intermediate future. And to the extent they want to do that, you do it at your own risk.
Yeah, well, James Carville and some of the others are saying, you all, and James Carville, we look back on Bill Clinton. If you had Democrats like Bill Clinton, we'd be happy.
Yeah, no.
He had a balanced budget.
Yeah.
He worked with Newt really well.
Exactly.
We were both there.
And he'd been a governor of a southern state, so he understood balanced budgets, and those were the days where there were moderate and conservative Democrats. Those folks are going the way of the dinosaurs. Folks like Joe Manchin in West Virginia and Sinema in Arizona, they couldn't get the nomination. You saw them switching when even Joe Lieberman lost the nomination in Connecticut.
Very much.
Here he was, the
Widely
Democrats.
respected.
Oh yeah, great guy in foreign policy, a man of integrity. But the fact that he wasn't anti-war enough, he doesn't get the Democrat nomination. He did win as an independent, but lost the nomination in Connecticut. And we as Republicans need to also be aware that we're a broad and diverse party, and you're not going to agree on every single issue.
Yeah.
And you need to respect it. If you, generally speaking, care about individual liberty and individual rights, and we're on the side of law enforcement and lower competitive taxes, reasonable regulations, affordable, reliable energy, those type of things. And there'll be social issues, and we have people, and that'll tear us apart. But you need to I always think of Ronald Reagan, and I'm chair of the Reagan Range Board of Governors. Ronald Reagan said, somebody who agrees with me 80% of the time is my friend, not my enemy. And so not everyone needs to be absolutely in lockstep in our party either. And you all in Maryland understand that better than anyone else. The fact that you got elected there is still miraculous.
Thanks, Joe. Mark.
So I was going to say, Governor Ehrlich, you've written now a couple of books. You've got a new one coming out. They really do a great job of capturing how Trump, sort of the political dynamics, almost the jiu-jitsu, if you will, of how he frames a message in a way that has I think it's fair to say, sometimes brings the worst out of his opponents and kind of catches them off guard. Tell us a little bit about your next book that's about to come out, and what are your observations about the president's style and strategy?
Well, I try not to repeat what a lot of pundits do and say. This is the third installment of the Trump trilogy, Revolution, Redemption, Revival, which basically speaks to the last couple of years. What I find fascinating, and I'll just open this up, and Kendall's heard me say this a million times, and it's basically level one. Trump's playing chess and his opponents are playing checkers. And because they hate so much and it's so visceral, they always take him literally. They take his words literally. Now, all you have to do is go read The Art of the Deal. Just go back to whenever that book was published and understand that Trump at various times is either fooling around, serious, throwing something on the wall to see if it sticks, or actually negotiating. And you have to know the background. You have to know you have to at least go to second level thinking to understand where he's been on this issue. Where does he want to go? Panama Canal. Does China control the Panama Canal? No. Did he want Panama to detach themselves from the Belt and Road Initiative, Xi Jinping's initiative? Yes. So that's what now last night, what he said it again. So he probably wants something else. But the fact of it is, Gov, they hate him so much, they refuse to provide context or even understand context because, and Kendall and I are laughing about it all the time on our podcast today, what he did Friday with regard to Zelensky is way old news. The minerals deals now, I mean, they're so stuck in the past. They're so literal. They so hate him so much. A discerning, subjective analysis of where he's been, where he's going, what he really wants is missing from the left. And I really do believe it's one of the themes of my book, Mark. I really do believe it's one of the reasons they've been unable to stop him. That, and of course, what everybody knows, this billionaire celebrity casino guy creates and makes incredibly strong his attachment with people who work with their hands, who punch clocks for a living, who make $35,000 a year. And no one saw that coming either.
People ought to read your book, Bob, because the thing with Trump, and it's really great what you're saying, because it is hard to explain. He's a force of nature. Most people in public service, your word is your bond. Whatever you say, whatever will be used against you, or you keep your word, and whatever pronouncement you make is people are going to expect you to stick with it. You just take the Panama Canal thing. He said, and Marco Rubio, he points at Marco, and Marco's supposedly going to get us.
He's like, what?
Yeah. So if he doesn't get the Panama Canal back, it's because Marco failed to get us the Panama Canal. Now, the thing that he did do, that Hutchison Whampoa had the port operations. It's a Chinese Hong Kong company, and they sold that to BlackRock. I think it was BlackRock, who has port operations elsewhere. It's not as if
all that today.
Yeah. So that happened. The other thing with these tariffs, the first time he wanted to put the tariffs on Canada and Mexico, I'm just thinking, all right, he's going to be putting taxes on the crude oil out of Alberta, Canada. And a lot of that goes to northern states, northern plain states, and it's refined in the US. And I'm just thinking, gee whiz, we want to reduce gasoline prices in our country. Well, somebody got to him and he dropped that from 25 to 10. Then he's trying to get the Keystone XL pipeline company that got approved when he was president. Day one, Biden cancels it, throws 10,000 pipe fitters out of a job. The SAP union bosses for the pipe fitters somehow justify this because they're just Democrat operatives, not the rank and file. And so then the other week, Trump is trying to get them to build a Keystone XL pipeline again. And the guy said, we're just not going to do it. It's too much. We can't be investing tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. There's no certainty to it. And I was just thinking, it's so inconsistent for him to want him to build a pipeline. In the meanwhile, he wants to put an extra tax on the crude oil coming through the pipeline. And even the latest things on Canada, the auto execs finally got through to him, and now he said, oh, well, we're not going to do this on the automotive sections and so forth. And maybe on April 2nd, there'll be some certainty. That the problem is that people try to rely on what the president is saying, what the policies are. And for people making long-term business decisions, this constant news flash, breaking news, that's changed. They can't be making decisions on just, oh God, all right, now what? Or they stockpile a bunch of stuff ahead of time before the tariffs come in. And your book really needs to be understood so people don't take what he says literally. You and I would never get away with any of this stuff.
Never, ever.
But he
ever.
does. He does. And it's phenomenal. There's no one else like him. And any other politician who thinks they can operate the way he does, they'll be roadkill.
That's true. That is really true. I don't think people really recognize that. Has to do a little bit with his celebrity.
Yeah, he's a showman. He's a great promoter.
And he knows how to do that. And people, maybe it's because what you're saying, maybe it's because people have seen him do that throughout his career. His show had a lot of sort of has-been stars that he brought back. And then, would see what they would do on his show. It was just so funny in so many ways. And he, like you said, he goes with the flow of what he thinks should be going on. And the problem is he's got great instincts too. Really good instincts. So when that happens, like you said, people rely on what he's saying. And I know that I've said to many people, no, just wait a while.
Smart.
Just trust him for a while. Just wait.
Although that's what I try to do.
change.
That's what the same with Ukraine and all of this. I'm saying, all right,
Same thing.
maybe this is the art of the deal, and but still, it's so awful. Here we are in a UN resolution voting with Russia, Iran, and North Korea.
Optics awful. Yeah,
it's terrible. And I'm just saying, I'm going to wait. I'm not going to completely condemn this until this is all said and done. And if it works out, great.
So this is exactly what I talk about in the book.
Perfect.
So you have two things happening. You have this unique MO, as my wife describes it, that no one in Gov, that nobody could get away with. No one else in the world. They'd lose an election in a heartbeat. Yeah. So you have this very unique MO, this, of course, right-leaning, but nevertheless transactional guy who's going to get the best deal he can, and terms are going to change up to the very last second. And that's what he's going to do. And then layered on top of that, you have an opposition party that's going over the cliff, uber left.
Yeah.
I mean, so Trump looks more conservative than he actually is. I mean,
and he comes off as
common sense.
Exactly. The other side, somebody was saying, they won't talk to, they lost a job because Trump, they worked for USAID. They lost a job. They won't talk to their parents because the parents voted for Trump. Well, don't blame your parents, or don't blame the Republicans. Blame the Democrats for running people trying to hide Biden, and then Harris and Walz. If you had nominated someone who might appeal to the middle, to the independent voters, you might could have won. But you run these absolute far left extremists who want to tell you what kind of car you want to drive, and the men on women's locker room and sports teams, and more taxes and ridiculously high prices of everything, groceries, gasoline, electricity, and all this. They really don't relate to anything that is normal for people. And so there was, I think, a lot of it's a backlash from all of the draconian lockdowns from COVID as well. Yeah, and people who care about education, which of course we all do, some of these kids being locked out of school in effect for 2 years, it's mostly lower income families that you wonder if they'll ever pick that back up from it. And so there's job losses, businesses wrecked, but also opportunities for young people who lost education because of this paranoid hypochondriac dictators that were shutting down schools. And then of course the big one in Virginia was the governor shut down churches, but kept the alcohol, the ABC stores open.
Mm-hmm.
That play. I was just going to say, with job losses and the federal employees that are losing their jobs and the great sympathy there what Democrats have. But remember, in the case of COVID, all these private sector workers that
no sympathy for them.
Well,
or even worse.
The soldiers.
You got it, because they wouldn't. And of all people who were not at risk, it's healthy young people serving in the military, and they lost their jobs.
Yeah,
and that is Trump lost Virginia by approximately 6%, a little under 6%. He had lost it by 10% the previous in 2020. In this area here, the Hampton Roads area, where there's a lot of military folks, they still resented. Running people out with it, and we held our congressional seat here. Trump lost, but
meanwhile, many federal employees, USA knew what they were doing. The money was going out to places they knew where that was going in large amounts, and I think other federal employees, having been there, play a system that has now been caught. And they've been caught red-handed, sort of, with their hand in the cookie jar. And I think that although some of it is very unfortunate for people in this area, the rest of the country looks at it and says, this president's doing exactly what we want him to do. We want him to get this fat out of there. We want the waste gone. We don't want all this money going out of the country. What about the people in North Carolina?
Yeah.
What about the people in California? Let's take care of here first. And that attitude prevails. Unfortunately, Maryland and Virginia are most affected by federal employee job loss. And there's a lot of good federal workers, as we all know. But there's also a lot of fat in that government that's been built on for years.
Yeah, and a lot of what Trump's doing is things, Bob, you and I did as governors. And my first act as governor after getting sworn in was signing a strike force for efficiency in government.
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to reduce our state government workforce by 10%. We went through systematically every regulation to determine if they were necessary. If so, is there a better, less burdensome way of doing it? And after 4 years, 71% of the regulations in Virginia were repealed or amended. And,
Geez,
and
well, I got a
Trump's-
former Democratic governor to do that for me, Governor Mandel. I appointed him to a commission to do that. That was
right.
the old
And
Democratic
so
Party.
these are just smart things to do because there's always better ways of doing things. And with technology, you don't need as many people to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what you want. And a government focused on its priorities. At state level, it's education and law enforcement. And the way you pay for it is with a vibrant economy where people are working and businesses prospering and you get the tax revenue from it. The federal government doesn't have a balanced budget. So they just keep spending and spending and bloating and bloating. Foreign aid, Kendel, as you best expressed it, out of all appropriations, foreign aid is by far the least popular. And USAID in some of their health and feeding and food efforts are very beneficial. But that's got to be reformed so this kind of thing can never happen again. Mm-hmm. There needs to be safeguards, and that's management and implementing everything, whether it's USAID or whatever foreign aid or any domestic programs. And it's just something that it's not just good government. It is crucial at this time. Mm-hmm. The president says he wants to balance the budget. That would be great if they did. The reality is that interest on the debt, the federal debt, now is a higher expenditure than the entire Department of Defense budget. Mm-hmm. And they got to get things in order. Otherwise,
and
we're going to get sunk as a country.
Who knew we'd have Elon Musk and his band of super geniuses that's able to go in a month through all these agencies and figure some of this out. I mean, in some respects, it's a bit of a perfect storm and, a welcome change for many.
It is. I think they have
some of the optics haven't been great. I get it.
I think that the Doge has the potential to be the most lasting, enduring benefit of the Trump administration. The key, though, is implementation. The way I did it when I was governor is it's a similar approach, or at least a similar mission. But we did it through our cabinet secretaries and the agency heads, and they would evaluate folks. And you had an early retirement system and so forth. And people knew what they were getting. And it was just not that there weren't people screaming and yelling, gosh, we need more people in the Department of Transportation, all that kind of usual blather. But it was implemented in a more understandable and credible way. And again, I think Doge can be great, but they got to implement this in a more measured way or more thoughtful way, and get to the same goal. But don't fire all these folks that are working on our nuclear arms, and then oh no, we can't have that. Bring them back in. It's just
sloppy. It's sloppy and dumb.
So that's the implementation, and I think that if they did it, and you had, for example, Marco Rubio says to all the State Department folks, you don't have to answer this letter about, what are 5 things you did that are worthwhile last week, which is perfectly fine. But again, if you do that through their superiors, their direct
Mhm.
reports, that comes off better than what authority does Doge have? And you actually have agencies within the Trump administration, secretariats, that are in disagreement. That's not the way to run it in a coherent way.
So
If I
we
can
want to
just,
change the
yeah, I'm sorry,
Okay.
Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I did want to ask a question. We talked a little bit about the two states, Virginia and Maryland, and I don't want the show to end, and we only have about 5 minutes left before asking about Maryland becoming a pejorative in Virginia politics.
It's a verb.
Uh,
It's just a verb.
verb.
Right? This is okay. All right.
All right,
So-
what are you talking about? It's a verb.
Yeah, what did that mean?
Yeah,
verb.
we know what it means, and it ain't good. We know what it means. Don't Maryland, my Virginia says
Oh,
it
I see.
all. And
I always say don't New York, Virginia. Or
well,
don't
yeah, you
California,
could use that too.
Virginia.
The fact is that we're being used in conjunction with New York and California as a verb says it all.
You're not as
Anyway,
bad
Mark,
as
I'm
those
sorry.
two states. I'm not saying you're good, but you're not as bad as New York and New
Thank you.
Jersey and Illinois and
Have
California.
you, have you seen what's
Trying.
coming out of Annapolis
Exactly.
lately, Gov?
It's close.
Oh, really? Well,
Not bad. Bad.
well, the Democrats, we're talking about national Democrats. The Democrats in Virginia, the stuff that they pass, and thank goodness we have Governor Youngkin who's vetoing so much of this harm, these deleterious ideas. If they had their way, they would repeal the right to work law, and then would just become the southernmost northeastern state.
Well, we got you beat. We got you beat. We got
Big time.
condoms and vending machines in elementary school. Okay.
Right. Well,
Delegates.
okay, but these legislators, the Democrats, you would think they're legislature of New York or
Yeah, I know.
California,
Well, yeah.
and they have the EV mandate, and just like and actually linked to California's regulations on these EVs.
But you
And
guys
that's-
had a revolution as a function of preemption of parental rights. That's really right. That was the
Mhm.
base of that's what really got Youngkin elected. We all know it.
Yeah.
And we're passing bills just going 180 degrees. Mark, is your point here? The other way.
Mhm.
The teachers union is so powerful here. Parents are so powerless here.
Yeah, and see this. Actually, we ought to bring you in. Winsome Sears, I think, is going to be our nominee for governor. And people need to understand this. These Democrats in Virginia are trying to push collective bargaining, and we have some, as you would guess, localities that are run by commissars in the city of Richmond and Fairfax and Arlington, Alexandria, and they've put in this collective bargaining for local government employees, which it's great for hiring of lawyers and all this compliance, and it's really a wall between the people, the parents, and the school board or the local governing body, and people don't understand this,
Mhm.
and it adds to costs and makes government less responsive. The local government or state, if you have collective bargaining, they have to deal with the union bosses. That's who they're negotiating with. They're not trying to figure out what's best for the people. We have to do this, otherwise these people will strike, and you got to pay more. It just adds thousands of dollars to local government
Hey,
per
Gov.
person.
Gov, in Maryland, we skipped the wall. We went right to preemption. So
See, that's
I mean,
just awful.
What used to be this third rail politics, Mark and David, parents and parents' rights, right?
Mhm.
That was right. The third, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Now, the left, the progressive left, that's part of their agenda. I mean, touching it, it's overwhelming it. It is taking it apart. It's no, these are our kids, not your kids.
Right.
That's pretty radical stuff.
And I
Yeah,
always
and
thought elementary school kids were pretty safe because parents are generally much more involved then, right? They sort of
Yeah.
cut you off the higher they go up into the years of school. But elementary schools are now not safe. And I think that's just appalling. And I think it's really scary for parents of young children. They really need to question their schools and where they want to send their kids to school, even more than I ever thought before.
I'm sorry, David, we cut you off.
Sorry about that.
well, no, I was just saying that had Terry McAuliffe not screwed up and let the truth out, he might have been able to win. Plus, we had early voting, so maybe a lot of people had
It's a
already
great
voted.
point. Terry made the mistake of saying what he was actually thinking.
But be stuck with it for 2 weeks. You think of that I try to tell folks, and it's kind of upsetting, but if you look at the way Virginia votes, and I keep this right here at my desk, Virginia votes about the same as New Jersey, the same as Minnesota actually voted a little bit more for Trump than did Virginia. We vote again in about the same as Maine, and a little bit more conservative than New Mexico. So when Youngkin won, he was an excellent candidate, ran a technically perfect campaign to put in $20 or $30 million of his own money to offset Terry McAuliffe's great fundraising ability. And you have McAuliffe, insulting parents and insisting on it for several weeks before he said he really didn't, which just reminded everyone, yeah, you did. And you have the political winds to your back. The two governor's races, these off years is New Jersey and Virginia. The New Jersey race that folks thought Republicans had no chance came really, really close.
Yeah.
So with all of that perfection, Youngkin only won by 1.9% of the vote.
Wow.
That's how much you have to run just a perfect campaign with an outstanding candidate, raising the money with the right message.
Yeah.
And then you have the prevailing political winds that even if you do have the right message and all the money and the great candidate can wipe you out. So it's going to be tough. And there's a lot at stake. And obviously we got the House of Delegates also.
Have you endorsed her, Gov?
Yeah, I'm for her.
Okay.
I don't think I maybe have done it formally, but I'm for Winston Sears. These other people who are running, these other people who are now running. I was just thinking there's a line, something about go sell crazy someplace else. We're all stocked up here.
We'll make news on this show.
What?
So we'll make news on this show.
We always do.
We're coming up to the very end, and this is the point where we basically talk about plugging what's up. Of course, on this show, we always talk about going to Masoni's, right? Great restaurant, great Italian restaurant. So we'll make that part of our agenda. But what else? And obviously, Governor Ehrlich, you've got your book coming out. When exactly does it come out, and what else are you working on?
Looking at June. I also want to plug our podcast.
Right.
Governor Allen's been on.
Bottom line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich. It's awesome.
Numbers are growing all the time.
Great. Good.
And pay attention to Virginia, and pay attention to New Jersey, and pay attention to the judges' races in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
We got to keep this momentum going.
Well, there's probably a lot of people from Maryland who know folks in Virginia. And we have a really important governor's race. We have a good contest for lieutenant governor. Jason Miyares is an outstanding attorney general, and he's just done a fabulous job. He's the one who came up with a brilliant attorney general's opinions to allow Governor Youngkin to extricate Virginia from that California EV mandate and also get us out of that regional greenhouse gas idiocy that was adding 4% on our power bills in Virginia. And he's stood by women's sports. He's got daughters. He's on the side of women's sports. His mother's from Cuba. He appreciates freedom in his blood, and he's just outstanding. And so in Virginia, you don't vote as a ticket, and so we got to keep Jason as Attorney General of Virginia. He's just been fantastic, and Winston will do the right thing as governor. And then Governor Youngkin, not going to agree with everyone on every issue, but if it weren't for Governor Youngkin's election, Virginia'd be going down. And at least Virginia, after 14 years of slightly losing population in Virginia, losing population, finally, for the first time in 14 years, there's a slight increase in population in Virginia. Meanwhile, North Carolina, Tennessee, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Arizona, and those states have been booming. But at least we got Virginia slightly ascending again. And in Spanberger, the Democrat, will try to portray herself as a moderate, but she voted in Congress to do away with our right to work law. She did support the EV mandate from the federales. It's bad enough if a state's stupid, but you'd hate to make the entire country stupid by Congress intervening in these idiotic ideas. And the problem is she may be left of center, but the legislature in Virginia, just look at the bills they passed, or even introduced. One of the fellows who's running for lieutenant governor introduced a bill for a tax incentive for hiring ex-felons, former felons. So the point is if you hire a rapist, you get a tax break. If you hire a rape victim, no such thing. I mean, this is now I don't think the bill passed, but the fact that someone, and this guy's running, and he's running for lieutenant governor, and I just this just shows you how addled they are.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being on. We've always have a great show, and we hope Susan recovers soon.
Me too. Me more than anyone else.
Give her our love.
Yeah,
Will
absolutely.
do. Well, it's good to
Thanks,
be with
everybody.
you, Kendel and Bob. And nice to Mark. And it's good to have David Shepard on board from one of the shows.
Well, thank you, Governor. I appreciate it.
And
Good to see you,
Dwight Patel,
David.
the great commissioner.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Adios.
Great show, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, really good show.
Yeah, it was good. And good seeing you, Governor Ehrlich. So,
Where do you get our bill? Where do you get our bill, Dwight?
Yeah.
Dave, good to see you, my friend. Mark.
you too,
Yeah.
and read the book if you mind, if you get a chance. I
Yeah,
think you'll
I will.
like it.
See you soon,
All right.
guys.
Cool.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you,
Hey,
guys.
guys.
got it.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.